Hello, and welcome to this month's ICA LinkedIn Live, where today we're going to focus on compliance as a leadership function. My name is Tim Tyler. I'm the Vice President of the ICA, and I was due to be joined today by Gernot Toll. You may have seen this being advertised, but unfortunately, Gernot isn't unable to join us. But I'm very, very grateful to his colleague, Georg Guswein, who has been able to join us. And as I say, I'm very much in your debt, Georg, for doing this and stepping in at short notice. By way of introduction, Georg is a lawyer, or in German, a Sonderkust, and his history is as general counsel for some quite large German engineering businesses. And he's co-founded the German Institute of Compliance. So it's wonderful to be joined by Georg today. And we're going to have a conversation around compliance as a leadership function. Georg, are you there?
I should be.
There. Good to see you. And thanks again for joining us for this conversation. So I'm going to jump straight in, if I may. And I'd like to just ask you to share a little bit about your experience over the last 25, 30 years. We had a conversation yesterday, and you were describing the challenges that you faced, particularly in the context of corruption. I wonder if you could unpack that a little for our benefit.
Yeah, a pleasure. And also, again, thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure for me to be here. Let's maybe just all go back for 25, 20, 30 years. How was the situation then? And it was quite different. In Germany, there was a huge change in legislation because before the change of the year 2000, in Germany, corruption was tax deductible. So bribery that was paid could be deducted from your taxes. And thereby, basically, the government promoted bribery. So it was promoted by the government. And this changed basically around the year 2000. And then it changed very dramatically. The German government did a very, very good job. They not only disallowed this deduction of taxes, but also implemented a system where the public auditors were, by law, forced to hand over any doubtful payments in the books of the companies they were checking over to the prosecutor. And when they had doubts, but as a public official will have always doubts once there is money potentially being paid with a criminal intent, because they could be helping that criminal action and then losing their pension and incurring much greater harm that potentially the person that actually did the crime would incur. So in fact, that had great impact in German business, and the companies needed to change their practice with regard particularly to corruption, and started to implement sort of compliance management systems. They were not really called compliance management systems at this time. It was more about creating policies that would make it hopefully impossible to have payments which could be bribery in your organization. And
so
very yes.
Really interesting, the timing of this. You mentioned around about 2000, because of course that would have been shortly after the US addressed this through the FATCA legislation. And that, I think, acted as a driver across more than just the United States, across much of the world.
Absolutely. That was the reason. Germany entered into some international conventions also, which prohibited bribery. And that finally forced the government to make these legislative changes. And I talked to some politicians at this time, and it was quite interesting to see how they really thought about it. And there was large discussion that, well, it has worked quite well over the years before. We made good money with this practice, but there were also politicians who said, no, we need to stop. It's over. We need to really, it's causing a lot of damage and pain and injustice in the world. And it's like a cancer that grows and comes back and back again. And we need to really systematically fight corruption. And that I think brought about the changes that we saw in legislation then. Yeah.
So I take it then that Germany has been completely free from corruption since the year 2000, and we've been able to move on from this.
Absolutely, no corruption in Germany and from Germany. No. We all know that's not the case.
Unfortunately,
that's not the case. In fact, some companies may have adopted. Unfortunately, they have adopted their systems. They have just, very important, as we all know, is sort of proof of services. So you need documentation. You need documentation that your agent or your consultant has done some work. And unfortunately, some companies are not really interested what happens beyond the documentation. They are happy with having the documentation in place. And more, also again, from the prosecutor's side, and here the DOJ, we're talking about paper compliance, because they have understood that this is now happening or has happened. And I think, again, we see maybe a new momentum coming up. We have sort of controls coming from different angles, like now also supporting whistleblowing from a European perspective, that you have a whistleblower protection directive. Same thing was there in place in Germany before. Now we need to adopt to European ideas. That changes a lot also. There's higher risk to be that things are covered up and that you then have a huge issue because you had a compliance case. Yeah.
So what I think you're describing is that Germany, as in I think many parts of the EU and across much of the world, is on a journey.
Yes.
From 2000, where the problem was arguably at its height, but it was certainly severe. New legislation was introduced. And I think what you've described is that to some extent drove this underground, so that there was paper compliance. And by that, I think you mean on the surface, there appears to be compliance. However, that wasn't always replicated beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
So that the auditors, and you touched on the fact that the auditors were required to look for evidence of corruption, as long as they were given the right answers, then perhaps on occasions they were satisfied with that and moved on.
Yeah.
So where is Germany now in your experience on that journey? That's a hard question, I know, and I guess there won't be a straightforward answer to it.
No, there is not, and I think you need to really differentiate possibly markets. You need to differentiate also the size of the company, and maybe also whether it is a family-driven business or a business that is listed on the stock market. So there is not really a clear answer. I think we are moving more and more in a direction where, well, business understands that compliance can be a competitive advantage. We are always talking about the level playing field that we need there. That's something where also government comes in play. If rules are not enforced in certain countries, then maybe it's still an advantage to use unfair business practices, which is corruption, one of them. But it can more and more help that companies understand, once I have a compliance case, and often the ones that are covered up now are systemic, so they are severe. This really can damage your reputation tremendously. And as for me, reputation is sort of the other side of the coin of trust. We all understand if we damage our reputation, customers will lose trust in our brand or in our company, in the people working for the company. Also for you personally working for this company, if there's a big compliance case, you might even be damaged personally in your reputation. So I think more and more people understand we need to really focus on preventing compliance cases instead of producing paper. I'm not saying that everybody does that, but it's just to think in this extreme. I think helps to say let's focus to find mechanisms, processes, methods, um, in, in, implement change in organizations. How do we do that? How we change the culture of an organization, which has grown over years, maybe tens of years, to a different approach to rules, that we consider rules to be helpful and also design them in a way that they are actually helpful and not just, causing from the perspective of the people who are the addressees of these rules, problems. They should actually solve problems and help work. Processes should help and not be cumbersome, too cumbersome. Some of them have to, but it's better to, limit the number of rules. And then once you have lesser rules and you really understand them, apply them very consequently. I think that's very important.
So going back to our idea of a journey,
yes,
we can trace that progress. And I think what you're describing is that there's a growing that corrupt practices they're not acceptable. They are a thing of the past, and there can be in doing the right thing, in behaving the right way. But then I think you've also touched on the need to move beyond a rules-based approach to one that recognizes a culture within an organization that is healthy. And of course, as you've touched on, that can be very, very challenging, particularly where some of the practices can be deeply embedded within the systems. I mean, I think of Siemens, for instance. I know this going back a few years, but I think they actually had drawn up good practice within the business and circulated this that endorsed offering bribes. It was simply part of the way in which that business operated. So I guess this brings me to the title for today's LinkedIn Live, which is Compliance as a Leadership Function. Can I ask you to reflect for a moment on that? What role does the compliance capability have on this journey that we're describing?
Well, very good and important point. Thank you, Tim, for raising that and reminding us both what the title of our little discussion is. You're quite right. It's my personal focus, really, reaching the leadership function. Compliance should be a leadership task, one of many tasks, of course, and it should also be a leadership competence and, of course, accountability. Yeah, it's three elements that are important here. And when I started compliance, it was often sort of the perspective and perception of the people I was working with. They said, well, we're doing the business, you're doing compliance. And I did this for some years, I said, okay, well, maybe that's the way it works. Yeah. But sooner or later, I realized, no, that doesn't work. It starts, of course, with the C-level. They have to send out the right messages. And that's often difficult enough to bring down the whole organization to a clear understanding what compliance is about. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are very, these typical manager talk sentences out there, get the job done, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. Yeah, that might create misunderstandings. And so it's really important that also from the top, there is a language and an authentic approach, also talking about the problems. Not always, it's everything fine. Yeah, go to whatever country and do your thing. It's going to be fine. No, asking people, so I know that you are in a difficult country. Do you face any challenges? And please tell me. And how do you deal with these challenges? So an open dialogue also about these challenges that you have. certainly. Yeah.
So we can see then the importance of the C-suite, of the senior leadership, and of course, I think the middle leadership within an organization for setting the tone, setting an example, and driving the organization in the right way. I wonder if there's another way of looking at it, which is to recognize that the compliance function itself can influence the leadership, can influence the organization, and that's part of its role, so that there's a symbiotic relationship between the two.
Absolutely. As a compliance officer, it's helpful to have a trustworthy relationship with your managers, which doesn't mean that you are buddies in crime. That's often misunderstood. That's like, okay, we'll do it together. That's not the idea. But it should be clear that people can basically come to you with any problem they have. Yeah, and then you openly discuss it, and both have the clear understanding we're walking out of this room with a solution that is at least legal, and that should be also clear. We are in some areas beyond just it's legal. We might have to enter into areas, and I think that's very important. Is it legitimate what we're doing? It's not only about is it legal. And there we are at a point which you raised just a minute ago, values. Yeah? If the value of your company is possibly fairness, illegitimate business will not be fair. So
Yes.
you have to really these values, they have to have meaning when you do business. If they are just somewhere on a wall, on a nice sticker or whatever, it's useless. They have no value. So yeah, and then it's of course it's a great challenge once you have it decided. You want to have values, principles in your organization. How do you operationalize them? How do you help people to recall these values once they are in a dilemma situation? And how do you help them to actually discover that they have a problem? Sometimes that's difficult enough. You're doing your business, you think everything is fine, and then you find out maybe, oh wow, I turned the wrong direction. And then often, that's my experience, it's difficult to go back on right track.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I'm mindful that we're coming up to time now. But before we finish, I know that the company you now lead has introduced a new concept within compliance, and I'm really eager to explore that with you just in the last moments of today's LinkedIn Live. I think you've given it the acronym PLLOB, or PLOB. I'm a big fan of this. I think it's really useful to have something that articulates out what we are and how we behave and how we make decisions. But could I invite you just to briefly explain, well, what is this thing called that you've described as PLOB?
I don't know if you see that, probably not. Yes, you do.
Oh, there we are. Yes, there it is.
It's a mnemonic, and I call it's the formula for good compliance. And the word good in this short sentence is very important. It's not about producing paper. It's about basically trying to implement a resource saving, culture building, sustainably effective compliance management system in your organization. And there, a short formula is very helpful. You can verbalize it. You can say, can you plot this? And behind these 5 letters are 5 words. The first word is press, basically for publicity. The second word is leadership. The third word is legal. The fourth word is others. And the last word is belly. And all of these words stand for a question. The first question for press is, does this promote our reputation? For leadership, it is, does this represent our values and make me a role model? For legal, it is, does this comply with our rules and the law? And for others, does my personal network accept this? And last but not least, making it an informed gut instinct decision. Does this give me a good gut feeling? Why is it an informed gut feeling? Because you have just asked yourself these other 4 questions, which then have to be sort of tested in a safety net via gut instinct. And this short formula sums up, from my personal conviction, everything what compliance is about. From a very narrow approach, rules, with a second L in the acronym, to a very broad approach, values, principles, purpose, under the word leadership. And I have implemented this in large organizations, and I've seen that it is very, very powerful. Also because it helps to sort of draw away this unpleasant, and we have to be honest, it is unpleasant in many organizations, taste of compliance. Yeah, if you say to somebody who has a problem, whoa, wait, this is not compliant, you will immediately see a change in his face. You know, he will be offended, possibly. He might answer, oh, have I done something criminal here or what? No, no, it's just not compliant. But you are immediately in a sort of in a bad atmosphere, asking this person, hey, let's plot this. He will know, or she will know, what plot is about, and you will both go through this process and come up with the right decision. That's really the idea about it.
Georg, thank you. We're going to record a second video in a short while, which will be recorded rather than live, and it will be available to ICA members. And I think we're going to go a little bit further in exploring just how you've used this idea of the PLLOB, or the PLOB. What we will do in the meantime is put a link to, I think it's your website, yes, in which you explain a little bit more about the PLOB to accompany this video. So a little bit later on this afternoon, I'll add to the ICA LinkedIn record a link so that anyone that's now currently listening will be able to access the PLOB and see more details of it.
Oh, thank you for that.
As I say, I think it's really useful to have something that there's a common currency around, and that individuals can sign up to, and it is immediately applicable when difficult decisions need to be made. Okay, Georg, we've slightly run over, actually. Can I sincerely thank you for stepping in? And for anyone watching, yeah, you may not perhaps appreciate this, but Georg is in fact joining us from the beach. You are on your holidays at the moment, so that makes us even more grateful for your time. I hope this has been a useful, for everyone joining us around the world, I hope this has been a useful discussion around compliance as a leadership function. Thank you.